Hi everyone, and welcome to the Round 5 edition of Footyology, the show that focuses on the football and farts in the face of faux controversy. I'm Rohan Connolly, with me is my co-host Mark Finey, and we'll be taking apart the long weekend's games molecule by molecule, getting an A+ on our science project, and then putting them all back together again. We've got all the latest news with a younger, sexier and far more ambitious news hound than the holiday-taking John Pierrick. We're here for all of your questions on Keyboard Q&A. We'll jump in Finey's car with a former great, pull apart your team's reputation on the credibility ladder and still have time to yell, we're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. So let's get into it with a very good afternoon to you, Finey. What's waxing your surfboard today?
Well, the Demons, I think, are almost genuine, so there's plenty to talk about the Demons. Fremantle in free fall. Hey, what were the odds? Imagine if somebody took the double, Leicester to win the EPL and Fremantle to collect the wooden spoon.
Well, Leicester were 5,000 to 1, so I reckon collectively 50,000 to 1?
Oh, no, they weren't 10 to 1 to win the spoon, Fremantle. They were 200 to 1. We're talking 1,000,000 to 1. Nobody took the bet because nobody thought it would happen.
Unbelievable. It's great times to be a footy fan, really, isn't it? That level of unpredictability.
Yeah, they were, what were they, 9-0?
They were, to start last year.
Not impossible that they'll be 0-9.
Well, there's a lot to talk about. Round 5 was a bit of a marathon spread across 4 days and filled with plenty of brilliant football, bruises, bumps and the odd brain fade. Let's look at the highs and lows from all that action with Hot or Not. You're off kicking us off today?
Well, I thought Melbourne is a good place to start. Melbourne is hot for 2 reasons. They beat Richmond, obviously. Look, they're in a position now of a genuine contender for the 8. But there's betting news for Melbourne, and that is Freo are in free fall. Now's the time to re-sign Jesse Hogan. I mean, there was real concerns that he would go back to Fremantle. That does not look like a destination anymore. West Coast have got their full forward and centre half forward. Sign him now. Make a certainty of that forward line. I reckon it's a great time to be the Melbourne Football Club.
I love the way they're playing, Finey. It's so different to the stodgy brand we've sort of got used to over the last couple of years.
It's almost AFL-like.
Well, I mean, it's flavour of the month, that brand, isn't it? I mean, higher scores, more attacking run-off half-back. It's easy to say it's all come from Simon Goodwin, who, of course, is taking over next year, but I'll give Roosie some credit for playing a part in it. He always said he wanted to stiffen up the defence first and then work on the other stuff, and it's proved to pretty much be how it's working out.
I mean, they are a stiffer team, and it's not Viagra, it's Viney. Look, that Jack Viney, standards are set in football teams. I saw it at St Kilda with Lenny Hayes, came into the side, and a midfield was built with a hardness, really, around not the efforts of one person, but the inspiration of one person. I think Viney takes that club a long, long way.
No, I agree. My turn now. I'm going first with Paul Puopolo. What a fantastic performance that was on Friday night. Won the Hawks a game. 5 goals, career best. 3 in the last quarter from memory. Of course, controversial one at the end. I think he was pushed in the back, but look at him. He flies, he runs fast. Originally basically recruited with a defensive philosophy in mind, just for that tackling pressure. But he started with that, and he's just kept adding to his game. You're now looking at a triple premiership player. I love the way he runs too, those little pistons pumping. You want to think of a cartoon-type analogy for him. I don't know if it's Popeye or Mighty Mouse or what is it. I'll tell you what, I interviewed him after the game. One thing, if he'd have to shave about 3 times a day. He's a very swarthy-looking gent. But I love watching him. I think even people who are sick of Hawthorn love watching Poppy play. He's great.
He came to the club as a back pocket.
Yeah.
Who would have thought that he'd be not only a forward, but not a defensive forward, a high-marking, exciting, goal-kicking forward. And you don't know what's around the corner for these footballers, especially mature age recruits. That Wagner at Melbourne's another one. There's a real case for picking guys that have matured in the years between 18 and 22, I reckon.
No, agreed. Your turn.
I've got to go not hot. The Richmond backline. Now, this might seem obvious. Does it seem obvious too? The Richmond backline, like big deal?
Well, you could make it all of Richmond, really, couldn't you?
I want to ask you a question. Has there ever been in the history of league football a situation like we have at Richmond? I believe Richmond have the best backman in the AFL, Alex Rance, and the worst backline. That back line, even with Alex Rance, with Stephen Morris, a too young and not physically ready Connor Menadue, and out of form Basher Hawley, Asprey, who, I tell you what, there's no problem of Asprey falling foul of the new interpretations for out of bounds. He kicks the old on the fulls.
Yes.
And when Chaplin drops back, he runs slower than Charlie Chaplin used to walk.
Well, interesting theory there, because we've been talking about Adelaide's defence perhaps being underrated, and it hasn't got sort of recognised household names. Perhaps it's that thing about the sum being greater than the individual parts, and that's working against Richmond, who are sort of putting all their eggs in the one basket. My turn now. I'm going a hot, another positive, and it's the Blue Baggers. They were just terrific in Perth. There's been nothing wrong with their effort all year, really, but they just haven't been able to get enough coherent attacking football. And look, let's not dress it up too much. It was a pretty ordinary sort of game, but you know, when the chips were down in the last quarter, Freo playing at home, the crowd willing them on, and they just kept going and going, the Blues, and look, full credit to them. It was an inspiring win, and they're on a rebuilding mission. First win for Brendan Bolton. That's the sort of win you can draw on for the rest of the season, I reckon.
Was there a song that went, Along Came Jones?
Tall, thin Jones.
And he came. Liam Jones somehow, it took a few guys to go off and a couple of miscued shots of goal, but eventually along came Jones. He kicked an important goal in that last quarter.
Slow talking Jones.
No, he's wide kicking Jones.
Too much singing on this show. Your turn.
Not impressed with a realisation that I came to on Sunday, and that is a guarantee that we will never again have a game at Etihad Stadium with the roof open. They closed the roof on Sunday. It was a perfect day. They enforced the new clause that says if it's sunny, the shadowing might be disruptive to the viewers. So if it's cloudy, it might rain. If it's sunny, it's going to be closed, which gives us eternal twilight. Have you been to Vegas? What happens there is all the shopping malls and all the casinos are in eternal. So they have 24-hour consumerism. It's eternally 5 in the afternoon.
Well, don't give them any ideas. I'll get the pokies in there as well.
Oh, don't worry. The commentators were in the afternoon game saying tonight this and. I reckon in 3 years we'll play a 2:30 a.m. game there and nobody will be the wiser.
Yeah, don't like it. They've baked into the broadcasters, not for the first time. Well, let's finish off, and a not for me, and it's the other side of that Carlton equation, Fremantle. And we talked about them off the top, but like, what is going on there? Really, the effort was okay, and this game sort of makes me even more worried. Obviously, the fact they're zipping 5, but they're actually having a crack, and they're just devoid of confidence. They can't hit targets, and more, I wrote this a couple of weeks ago, Finey, and people poo-pooed me, but I think it's more and more prescient. They are becoming what St Kilda was in 2011, which is Ross, for all his tactical acumen, and I'm a big fan of him as a coach basically, but he is a draining sort of coach. He really demands so much that if the rewards aren't there...
Well, hang on. Does he demand so much, or does the supporters of the team he's barracks for demand so much? Look, at St Kilda, he didn't have an opportunity to be expansive. St Kilda didn't get to play Port Adelaide in a grand final like Geelong did, win it, and then become this expansive team that gave players an opportunity. Every St Kilda fan demanded that the best players be played every week, and he was almost moulded by the need to break the drought. My
point, though, is that it takes such an effort on those players involved that when things start to go wrong and they haven't been able to scale a mountain, it's almost as if they, on a subconscious level, go, we've got nothing left to give. We're clearly not going to scale a summit. We've got nothing left to give. So they're in a terrible hole anyway, no doubt about that.
He's an all-or-nothing coach. You know that by the couple of times he played second teams when sort of guaranteed of finals positions, you know, the teams he sent over. I've got a feeling he will be a good rebuild coach. You're going to see players play you didn't even know existed.
Well, I hope
for the rest of the season.
But he could be 5 years of a nothing coach.
I just want to ask you something.
Yeah.
I believe this should happen. I reckon Matthew Pavlich should retire now. He didn't sign on to be part of a team near the bottom of the ladder that's rebuilding. He was going to help them if they didn't get Cam McCarthy to have another crack at the finals. And Sandilands, I believe, is close to retiring because he's got a serious injury. He might not come up this year. And Johnson.
End of the season for Pavlich, I reckon.
How about Johnson and Sandilands?
well, we'll cut a swathe through their list after the break. Time for a short break. When we return, it's a look at all the footy news so fresh you could get Curtis Stone to stand in a supermarket for 30 seconds, flogging it off and charging you 50 grand to do so. But let's check in first with our man Grant Dickinson, who's been running around to all the coaches' post-game press conferences, ignoring the spin and instead asking the pressing questions.
Can you not drink the lemon Gatorade? I'm supposed to grab it for Rohan.
Has he sent you a text yet?
Yeah, he has, and he's filthy.
Yeah, I'm sure he is.
Welcome back to Footyology, with reports breaking that our man John Pierrick is busy out in the field chasing a big story. He's promised us a massive scoop, provided it happens within a 10-foot radius of his beach house at Merimbula and preferably between the hours of 12 and 2 p.m. So on that basis, we've told him to get stuffed and gone and got a replacement who won't rest until the job's done and will run and get Finey and I a pack of Winnie Blues if we threaten him enough. It's a big welcome to the Ages, Daniel Cherny.
It's great to be here, Rohan, Finey. It is a bit disappointing that John hasn't been able to front up in April, early in the season, but I suppose it's a bit like Corey Enright, getting an early season rest in, and I'll try and fill his, big shoes.
Young talent, bit of a rising star in the making here, Finey. So hit us with your best shot.
Well, Finey, you were talking up Melbourne earlier, and Jeff Garlett is one player who's out of contract at season's end. I imagine he's going to be signing I hear he's going to be signing a new contract pretty shortly, though. It's interesting because Carlton obviously have lost a lot of their forwards, and Eddie Betts has been lauded, so too has Jared Waite. But I think Garlett's performance at Melbourne has been sort of perhaps understated. He kicked 4 goals in the game on Sunday night against Richmond, and he towed up Stephen Morris, as I remember. As I heard you talking about to a caller in SEN. Where do you think his performance has been at so far in the?
Oh, terrific!
Yeah.
I mean, like small forwards who apply defensive pressure and kick goals are like gold. I mean, you have a look at it now. All the good teams have one, don't we? We're talking about Betts, talking about Puopolo, Rioli. Maybe North's an exception, but they're at a real premium. The value of those sorts of players has gone up and up.
He does. He's not the complete small forward because he's really good at the close down pressure of a tackle. So people think he's a good pressure forward, but he's not good in a contest, and he doesn't have a great reputation for following his play around the ground. So upfield, he needs to work a bit harder, but he can kick a goal.
Another guy who's been kicking a few goals for the Demons is Dean Kent. He's also out of contract at season's end. Hear that talks had actually happened between him and the club at the start of the year, but perhaps he might have a bit more of a lofty pay packet demanded now that he's been playing some pretty good footy. I know you're a fan of his.
I reckon he's real good. He's strong, and he softly, he's actually an important part of their team.
He is strong. Do the tats make him stronger?
No, they don't make me stronger.
In perception terms. Yeah, but yours are hidden. He's a very visible.
He made me hide them.
He's one of those players. He's been around the mark for a while, and you look at those guys and they struggle a bit, and you see the tats, and you think, yeah, you're all sort of talk, not much action. But he's really lived up to it this year, hasn't he?
Who was the scariest tats I ever saw in footy was that Adelaide guy, Adam Richardson.
Yeah,
he played 3 or 4 goals
forward. Yeah, what did he have?
Pardon?
What did he have?
Well, he didn't have many kicks, but he had a lot of tattoos.
Yeah.
There's a few guys like that in the AFL at the moment, Finey.
You should see Dan. Dan's got a huge tat. He'll show us later. No, he hasn't.
Another guy who's been injured of late has been Tory Dixon. Came back, played his first game for the Western Bulldogs on Saturday night. So like Jeff Garlett, I think he's going to be re-signing pretty shortly. Another important player in the Dogs setup. He's a really great story. I mean, you were referring earlier to some of the guys, the mature age recruits who have come through. I think Tory Dixon kicked a lot of goals in the VFL. It's come through really nicely.
And the AFL.
And the AFL, exactly right.
He played for Noble Park and Frankston. There's a bit of a relationship between Noble Park and Frankston. And he's a really good player.
Spiritually.
He is the best kick at goal in the competition. He kicked a point on the weekend.
I was going to say, did that game on Saturday night, he kicked it behind, the entire crowd just went, what's going on here?
It's interesting as well with a guy like that, how much longer he's going to remain at the club. But, you do wonder whether the Dogs will try and push for a 2 or 3 year extension with a guy like that. I think he's sort of 27 or 28.
Well, hang on. Cranberry comes back next year.
Stuart who?
Yeah, I'm saying they're similar sort of play. They've got these mid-sized forwards. Obviously, the leader is Stringer, but you've got Stringer, Dixon, McRae. I think by the time next season comes along, Tom Boyd will be an essential part of the forward line. There might be a squeeze on one of those players, and they would garner a good price or a high draft pick. might be something in it.
Speaking of Frankston, should give a little plug. They got a good win on the weekend. Finally snapped the 24-game losing streak there
Against their bunnies.
Against their bunnies, Richmond. They used to beat up on Coburg when they were aligned, and they had a really great win down there at the Frankston Oval. Saw the scenes there at the end of the game.
The
Dolphins, exactly right.
You know, they had their captain out and one of their best players out. Pongrasic didn't play.
Was that still from the incident
a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah. I'll be interested to hear your opinion on this, Finey, because you're a passionate St Kilda man. The Saints and Sandringham there, speaking of the AFL, their alignment runs out at the end of the year. The clubs are meeting today to discuss the possibility of extending that alignment. St Kilda have been pushing to play games out of Moorabbin, but Moorabbin's not going to be available next year. How important do you think that alignment is for the clubs?
I'd like St Kilda to be able to go standalone because I think it works. It can work. It doesn't always work. But Sandringham's actually a very good club with a good feeder from the Sandringham Dragons. I'd stick with Sandringham. The extra expense and effort to run a VFL side doesn't justify getting rid of a very good partner in the Sandringham Football Club. I would have thought.
It's a more logical union than some of them, isn't it? They just seem to, I don't know, the beachside suburbs or something.
Yeah, I mean, there used to be a relationship between St Kilda and Sandringham. St Kilda had alignments with Sandringham, Frankston and Caulfield. No, mainly those two back in the day, and Dandenong a little bit. So there is a history there.
Caulfield.
St Kilda.
The Bears.
That was my team.
Yeah.
But
I bet you ended up in that social club of theirs after the game.
it was the animal
Absolutely
enclosure,
notorious.
Saturdays, bear cave Sundays.
Yeah. No wonder.
What about
Hungover Monday.
Yeah, you have led such a debauched life.
Well, even down to the Trevor Barker Beach Oval. I mean, the name of the venue is named after one of St Kilda's all-time great players.
And we'll be back on the VFA show. Come on, let's get on with it.
Speaking of a guy who played a bit of footy in the VFL of late, Tom Curran, who's one of the St Kilda young midfielders. There's a bit of interest in him towards the end of last year. He's also out of contract at the end of the year. He's the kind of guy that just keeps on just missing out the St Kilda team.
Yeah, he does.
Where do you think he's at, guys?
He's a bit short. So he's done some run with roles, and there was another Tom Curran, the ill-fated North Melbourne Tom Curran.
And the surfer.
Yeah, that's right. I just think he'd be a cheap pickup maybe for a club as what could be a handy run with player, small forward, but I don't think he'd kick enough goals, to be honest.
And Dan, great debut by Mason Cox yesterday in the big Anzac Day game, and Channel 7 Sydney were right across it, I understand. Yeah,
there was an interesting moment there that I'm not sure if we're going to get up on the screen here. Their tweet was a little bit dubious. We said former US college basketballer still sidebottom kicks points on debut. So they haven't quite got the message is reasonably right, but a couple of key facts being missed there.
I don't see any problem with that at all. He kicked goals, he kicked points, got the name wrong, got the dimensions wrong, got the nationality wrong, but apart from that, spot on.
A bit like how Collingwood were heading into yesterday's game.
Channel 7 were going to send that social media person to cover the 60 Minutes hostage crisis, but he had it happening in Libya instead.
I mean, Sydney's coverage of sport has always been, of AFL has always been a tortured one. There was a guy, and he did this more than once on Fox Sports, who would refer to Mark Lecrae every time he kicked goals as Mark Lecris. And it took me a while to work out who Lecris was, but I finally worked it out. It was Lecrae.
Did he cover the Grand Prix as well? That's a very fine effort, young man. I think John Pirrick's very, very worried at this stage, so well done.
I don't think he's worried. I think he's in Merimbula.
Oh, he's watching. Don't worry. You always worry about your replacement, Finey. You're never supposed to make them too good, and John slipped up here. He's given us a very good replacement. Thanks for joining us, but you'll be returning, Dan. You may not know this, but you will be returning later for our credibility letter.
Looking forward to it.
Well, let's get to another break. When we come back, Finey and I will be going for a spin with a former star, and this time we've picked up a chick as well.
Do you think it was a good idea to link arms and ride unicycles across from Adelaide instead of a plane?
Not ideal, and again, it's a work in progress for us. You know, we've identified the areas we want to keep getting better at, and that's one we'll keep working away on.
Welcome back to the show and to the segment where Finey and I take a drive down memory lane. Today it's a former Demon great, and he's got some far more attractive company with him. Let's check out this week's Stars in Cars.
Well, it's Stars in Cars. It's a beautiful day We're near the MCG, so it wouldn't surprise anybody to find out that our special guest today is a premiership champion, Brian Dixon of the Melbourne Football Club. Good afternoon, Brian.
Good afternoon, Mark. Good afternoon, Sam.
Sam
Good
doesn't.
afternoon, Rohan.
It's all right, Sam doesn't exist, but that's okay.
He's our mystery passenger. Hi, everyone. And we've got Brian's lovely wife, Carmel, with us as well. Say hello, Carmel.
Hello, Carl.
Very good. Comedian as well.
Now, have a guess. I'm going to ask Rohan a question to start off with. Fantastic gesture by Brian to make it for the interview today, because have a guess where Carmel and Brian have come from.
The Melbourne club?
No, explain, Brian, because you're no longer Melbourne based, are
Well,
you?
we live in Jamison. Carmel's lived there for over 30
wow.
years, and I've lived there with her for 13 years.
Wow.
So it's a long drive, 250k.
We're suitably on it. Just you obviously haven't seen our show. If you knew what drivel we spoke, you wouldn't have made the effort. But,
Hey, I don't like self-deprecation. We're going all right. Now, talking about going all right, as we do the first lap of the MCG, this
and
bloke,
you get your first toot.
this bloke, 5 premierships for the Melbourne Football Club. Brian, explain to us how it came to be that you played for Melbourne, because I've got a feeling, and I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but there must have been some element of, because you're from around Elwood or something, surely St Kilda must have been knocking at the door?
Yeah, my uncles played reserves football for St Kilda, so I was brought up as a St Kilda barracker, and my master at Melbourne High School was Lindsay Thompson, who became Premier of Victoria, and he took me down to St Kilda because I was playing in the first 18 for Melbourne High School, and the St Kilda authorities had a look at me and they said, well, you're tied to Melbourne, so don't bother going to live with your grandma who lived in Elwood. You might as well go and play for Melbourne, or if you can get a game, which I think they were quite doubtful about. And that was in 1954, and that's how it all started.
Pretty reasonable timing. So they Melbourne, of course, lost the 54 grand final to Footscray, gave the Bulldogs their first and only premiership, but 55, 56, 57, 59, 60 flags, 58 grand final, of course, Collingwood prevented you guys winning 4 in a row, and then another one 64. Like, it's such an incredible era, and we talk about Hawthorn of the 1980s, but Melbourne really, in terms of flags won and grand finals made, has to be the most successful era of any club in football history, doesn't it, Brian?
Well, I think it would go close if it's not the best, but we were 11 years in a row in the Final Four. So that's from 1954 until 1964. We already had 6 up until 1948, so that made 12 premierships, which unfortunately, since 1964, we haven't been able to add to the collection.
Was it all about talent, those sides? I mean, obviously Norm Smith, the doyen of coaching, but did you guys have that great an edge on the other teams in terms of natural talent, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think Jimmy Cardwell has to take a lot of the credit. He was the chief recruiting person, and he had a band of recruiters, Ken Carline and 2 or 3 others who were under him, and they really scoured Victoria for talent. And also they kept their eye on school football, and they had lots of links to various people in various areas of the state. And I think that the talent selection was second to none.
10, 11 seasons in the finals, 6 flags, but you weren't able to play in the 55 premiership. It's an interesting story, and it's, well, tell us the truth.
All right, well, I was captain coach of Commerce, and we were playing dentistry in the grand final, and the captain coach of dentistry was Mick Aylett.
This is at Melbourne Uni?
Yes, at Melbourne Uni.
Right.
And of course, Mick subsequently became the chairman, president, etc., of the VFL/AFL. In fact, he changed the VFL into the AFL. Wonderful man, Mick Aylett. And anyway, we had a team meeting on the Wednesday, and Smithy had told me on the Tuesday night, now, Brian, I don't want you to play in these university games because we've got the finals coming up, and you may get injured, and that would not be very wise. So anyway, I attended the team meeting in the Commerce faculty, And all the blokes were there, and they said, well, Dicko, if you don't play, we will lose, and it'll be your fault, and we'll have played 12 games of university football for nothing. And there was a guy there called Rex Thompson, who subsequently became a headmaster in the state of Victoria. And Rex said, I've got a car, which was most unusual in those days. I'll drive you home to Nunawading and pick up your footy boots, because I left my footy boots at home. So I agreed to get my footy boots, and I played in the game. I played well, and the Age next day it listed Dixon as one of the best players. And so Smithy got a copy of the Age presented to him on the Thursday night after the Wednesday game. And he said, is this you? And he pointed to the paper, and I said, yes, Norm. He said, well, you're out. You don't disobey my instructions. I told you not to play. So that was that. I missed 1955, and Jeff Case, of course, refutes that story. Jeff says, well, I was obviously much better than Brian Dixon, and I got selected on my merits.
Now, there's a couple of things about that. It was a 12-game season. Did you play in most of the home and away games for the university competition?
Yeah, I played in all the games at the university.
And
I was captain coach of Commerce.
And who were the teams? Commerce, law, dentistry, medicine, vet science?
Every faculty that you can think of had a footy team.
Now, Brian, you mentioned Norm Smith. I mean, a much revered figure. What was the secret to his coaching prowess, do you think?
I think integrity. I think that Norm he had a great saying which was called fair and just, and I won't add the adjectives that go with fair and just, but he prided himself in being fair and being just. Selection was always based on merit, and everyone got a fair go, and he had a real eye for talent and a real eye for playing people in different positions. Take Ron Barassi, for example. He started as a half-forward flanker, and then Smithy decided to shift him to ruck roving, which at that time was virtually unknown. And Barassi, of course, became probably the greatest ruck rover the game's ever seen.
We're asking all our guests to bring along a favourite piece of music. We've had some very, what's the word?
Eclectic?
Eclectic choices.
We're about to broaden the church again.
Well, we've had some rock, we've had some contemporary stuff. What have you got for us?
And the reasoning behind it is superb. Carmel is here for a good reason. Have a listen to this.
Oh, well, Carmel was, and I got married some 8 or 9 years ago, and I thought the most appropriate song to sing to her was Stand Up and Fight. So I sang it not only to her, but also to the audience of our guests at the wedding. And the part that I love most is where I talk to her about being my personal trainer, which is in the Stand Up and Fight song, of course.
So,
did you understand that, Carmel, that it was about being a trainer, not being
corner, all that.
Yeah. Because there's other parts of the song where we're going to whack you in the mouth.
Stand up and fight like hell,
Somebody else was doing that, so I was trying to...
And fight until you hear the bell. Stand toe to toe, trade blow for blow. Keep punching till you make those punches tell. Show that crowd what you know. Until you hear that bell, that final bell. Stand up and fight like hell. Stop and fight and stop and fight like hell.
You never played for Geelong, did you?
I was going to say, all I can hear is we are Geelong.
Brian, it's been an absolute pleasure. We've rung the MCG 3 times almost.
We have.
Would have been fitting to go 2 more times, but Brian, 5-time premiership champion with the D's, and I'm going to throw in a 6th flag for Commerce at Melbourne University. Stuck it right up dentist. Gave him a good filling in, I would have thought. Thanks a lot, Brian.
Thanks,
Thank
Brian.
you.
Thank you, Carmel. Did we talk too much dribble for you?
Thank you, Sam.
It's a lot of
Great stuff. Thanks so much.
Need a cooling solution that will stand up in the toughest conditions? Consider a Rapid Cool radiator from Radiator Direct. With industrial and truck radiator technology, Rapid Cool's reinforced radiators are suited to harsh Australian conditions. Radiator Direct, the better cooling solution.
Welcome back to Footyology, and now it's your turn. You ask the questions, Finey and I will fudge the answers, and much knowledge and wisdom will ensue. It's time for Keyboard Q&A. Well, here we go, Finey. How are you going on Twitter, by the way? I'm going to ask you this every week.
I slowed down a bit.
What's happened?
I'm just not used to doing it. It's a bit unnatural for me.
Requires discipline. It requires, people I know well would argue it requires having no other life, which is why I've now racked up about 40,000 tweets or something.
And I'm no good at, how many characters is it? 140. I'm verbose, I'm not concise.
Yeah, I had never noticed that at all.
You see, the reason I'm verbose, anyway, get on with it.
Well, okay, well, we ask every week, send your questions in to us, use the Footyology hashtag, we'll do our best to answer them, and they've come flooding in again today, Finey. So we'll start with Marty, who asks, can the Magpie forward line function effectively with both Travis Cloke and the super yank Mason Cox in the same side? Very good question. I asked Nathan Buckley this last night at the press conference. His response was, yes, they can, and indeed that's what they were doing during the NAB Challenge. And they had Corey Galt in there as well, and Darcy Moore. So, I don't know, what do you think?
Cloak and Cox? Sounds like a fleshy version of Cloak and Dagger, doesn't it? But I think it can work. Darcy Moore is not in great form, so he shouldn't be excused from the discussion about 2 or 3 of Cox, Cloak and Moore. Got to get the order right with those. It's going to be something that plagues my immature mind for probably 10 years. Well, not for Cloak anyhow.
Well, look, I think it's possible, but my feeling now is, why would you upset the balance? And obviously it's going
to be... after winning 1-1 against Essendon?
Well, it worked pretty well. And I think a key to it, funnily enough, isn't any of them. It's probably Alex Fasolo. I mean, when he's on, I thought he was terrific yesterday, Fasolo. Kicked 4, gave away about another 3.
You know, those guys, Cox is the one now that gets picked first because they need ruck support for Grundy. I mean, he was just getting thrashed in those games against Melbourne and St Kilda when he had to ruck on his own. So Cox is Cox didn't ruck much in his last year at Collingwood in the VFL. When he played there 2 weeks ago, he had 50-odd hit-outs. So he must play because they need that ruck support. Whether it's Witts or Grundy, one of them and Cox, then work out the forward line.
Or if you're from Channel 7 Sydney and you're listening to this discussion, obviously Steele Sidebottom is a contender for that ruck berth as well. Let's get on to our next tweet, and it's Lenny who asks, like Freo, has there been any other team in history who have begun the season zip and 5 after making a prelim? Now, that's come off the top, so we'll have to check our own memory banks. But I think I've got one, Finey. I reckon North Melbourne in 1975 lost the first 4 games of the season.
I can back that up. They lost the first 4 games.
And ended up winning the flag. But, of course, they'd played in the 74 preliminary final as well. But I'm pretty confident there hasn't been one since. So, more and more, I think...
North started 03 again after... 75, didn't they?
Yeah, I think they did. Yeah, and
made the granny.
Yeah, and 70. Yeah, they sort of slow starts were traditional, but look, it's costlier now. I mean, Hawthorn last year were 4-4, of course, but they at least had a couple of wins on the board after 5 games.
Can I just say about that 4-4? People sort of talk about the 4-4. They were just going at 50%.
It was a decent 4-4.
Yeah, they had the loss against Essendon, one more second they win that game. The loss against Port Adelaide, where they almost won after being 7 goals down at quarter time.
And Sydney.
Correct.
By a kick.
And all their wins were thumping, so there was never a feeling that Hawthorn were off their tucker.
Yeah, and it's certainly not the feeling that Freo's an unlucky zip and 5. They've stunk pretty much. Let's go to our next tweet, and just having trouble picking up that name. Can you read that name, Finey?
Humanism.
Humanism, sorry.
Humanism.
Glasses.
It's humanism.
Well, he asks, GWS and Gold Coast have started well. Are they liable to fall away in the second half of the season with their younger players? I'd say no. I mean, Gold Coast is a side now in its 5th, 11, 12, 13, 14, 6th season of AFL football, and GWS in their 5th. These guys have got 70, 100 games under their belts. I don't think the maturity from a psychological or physical point of view is an issue at all.
Gold Coast isn't a young team anymore. Their makeup has changed. They've lost a lot of their original young draftees. They've got guys like Richatelli in the team, obviously Ablett, but they've got some older players in the team, some young guys. They're a pretty normal blend of football team now, with some smoky recruits and still guys like Luke Russell and Danny Stanley. The GWS is a young team, and they're just getting better. Cameron came back into the side this week. Gee, they look good, and he's a good footballer.
We've undersold them too. I mean, they were right in finals contention last year until late in the piece and had injuries to senior players. They're looking very good. Let's get to our next one. And it's Mike who asks, does Freo give Fife the year off to fully recover? Interesting question. I mean, gee, it's a...
Oh, no, rushing back. He's only broken that leg twice, and they're going to finish out of the 8. Of course he doesn't play again this year. That's a lay down a certainty. It's the same leg that he's broken.
Yeah.
He's the best player in the comp, and they're not going to be in finals contention. I think he has to play the last 3 games.
Well, the way you're talking about him, they're not going to have anyone left. You've retired Pavlich this week. You've got Sandy retiring.
Yeah, and I know what you're doing, Ro.
What?
You want Essendon to get the first 2 picks and preserve their year of that hiatus year with 2 champions going into the future. Freo, look, if you're going to bottom out. And Freo's in prime position to bottom out.
Well, there's not much doubt they're doing that at the moment. Let's get to our next one. And Rob asks, is Lyon the right coach now for Freo? He said he's up for the challenge, but not invigorated about rebuilding. Well, this will be almost the best test of his reputation, I think, because, various reasons why, but history has shown he's not a play the kids sort of coach, but now he's going to be there for 5 years. He's going to have no choice. So does he in fact have to change his philosophy, or we'll find out for sure whether he's had to change his philosophy or whether he's just been a coach adapting to the circumstances around him.
He's got such a hard contract. WA has never been a long-term rebuild town because West Coast bottom out and next year they're back in the picture. So Freo supporters are going to expect the same. This is their first real rise to the top, quick drop to the bottom. They will not be giving him 5 years to get back up there.
No, well, he's a tough man and he might be needed for tough times. We've got a couple more to get through, so let's do it. Peter, who's an egg, always disappointing, Peter. Get a picture as your avatar, not an egg. Can we get names on jumpers sorted soon?
No.
Port Adelaide had a go with the Chinese stuff on the... No?
Names and numbers go on duffel coats. If you don't have a duffel coat, don't worry about it.
No one has a duffel coat anymore. Do they even sell them?
No.
I can't remember the last time I saw a duffel coat.
It's the demise of the footy fan.
I remember a couple of years they did do the names on the jumpers thing. You needed a telescope to be able to see who it was.
Do you know how many players there are now with hyphens in their names? I mean, Darcy,
too many.
Darcy, Byrne, Farr, Jones, Smith. He'll wrap around twice.
And they should all be playing for Melbourne, Finey.
He'll get strangled by his own name.
Okay, one tweet to get through, and we're going to do it by God. And it is Clarkey who asks, can the D's make the 8 this year? Well, of course they can. They're playing good footy. They've had one ordinary performance, and it was pretty ordinary to be honest. But narrow loss to North, few wins. Win against GWS looks even better now. They're flying. No reason at all they can't make the 8.
You know my answer to that is?
What?
Do Melbourne make little stickers that go between the numbers and letters on number plates? Yes, they can.
Well, they're going to have to. We're going to have to drop all the jokes about skiing and September holidays and. Been a while, hasn't it?
They are still the same people. It's the team that's improved.
No, I know, but I mean, it's just easy fodder for smart asses like us, and we're going to have to try something else.
I say, old chap, we might be busy in September.
Well, that's it for Keyboard Q&A this week. Keep those questions rolling, and apologies to a couple, including Red, who's a good Twitter friend of mine.
Rance Whitnell.
No, it's a woman actually, but apologies for that, Red. We will get around to you next week. Keep them coming in though. Use the Footyology hashtag and we'll do everything we can to spin you a line. Let's get to another break. When we return, it's time to find out whether your team is the real deal or a cheap imitation.
If you get the sack, do you think you may have to go back to your home building business and start again?
Yeah, I've got no alternative. But... we don't rebuild, but we restart, we rewire, we replumb.
Okay, so coaches bang on about the process and the plan and the results, looking after themselves. But it's a foolish coach who ignores the result they simply can't look after. And that, of course, is just where they rank on Footyology's credibility ladder. As we welcome back Wonder Boy Daniel Cherny. Now, have you been worded up on this segment?
I have. I'm a keen watcher of the show.
Okay, well, good. We'll add you to the list.
Have you been downstairs to buy the darts?
Yeah, I did go in.
How many have you got left, Finey?
Full deck.
No, we're not encouraging smoking on this show. Don't smoke, kids. All right, Wonder Boy, who doesn't smoke, of course. Let's start this discussion off with the top of the ladder. Now, it's been interesting. The last few weeks, we've had some alleged stragglers right up the top. We had Essendon a few weeks ago. We had Brisbane last week after that great win over Gold Coast.
St Kilda's been up there.
St Kilda has been up there, but I didn't think I was putting them in the straggler group, Finey. I think they're better than that. But I've got a big contender for a similar top dog this week, and it is the Navy Blues. I just think that was a cracking win in Perth. Yes, Fremantle was struggling, but they were desperate for the win too, and there was nothing wrong with their effort. Perth's always a difficult road trip, no matter how those two teams are travelling. And I just thought they were fantastic from go to woe, and pretty cool or cooler than their opponent when the game really had to be won. So my vote for top dog is Carlton. I think we've got some other reasonable contenders too for top spot with GWS. Good win over the Saints. Melbourne, really efficient win over Richmond on Sunday night. And North Melbourne, the Phantom team, who I'm a big rap for the Roos, and they should be part of the premiership calculations, but no one seems to want to talk to them. Gold Coast, yes, they're a bit flaky, but you still got to win up there. Conditions never easy. Great win. So Carlton, GWS, Melbourne North, how are we sorting them out, boys?
Well, it's wrong. Pre-season, you made me write a 14-page manifesto on the guidelines for the credibility ladder, and you're not reading it because it clearly states expectation versus performance, factoring in what happens during the game in terms of if players are lost by the opposition during the game, then that has to be taken into account. Now, Fife comes off. Lachie Neale played. He did get 40 touches, but he was sore. Johnson comes off and then comes back on with a hammy and stress fractures or something. I don't know why he came. But they had a lot of injured players. So Carlton's win was meritorious, but not as good as GWS's or Melbourne.
Well, OK, so we're going to put Dan in a tricky position here. He's got the casting vote.
It is a difficult one, and I can definitely see both of your points. You mentioned Fremantle. They didn't have Mundy or Sandilands either. I'm going to have to go with Carlton, though. Given
you didn't read the leaflet either then.
Which said always agree with Finey, but unbeknownst to you, Finey, I slipped in one after that which said ignore everything Finey says. So we're going with the Blues in top spot this week, GWS second, which leaves Melbourne and North. Now, which is the better win, the Demons over the Tigers or the Roos over Gold Coast?
Melbourne's.
Yeah? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Melbourne, especially given that they hadn't won consecutive in-season games since 2011. Hugely significant win. I have to say the D's.
It was a good win. I mean, it was a good, strong win. Richmond tried, and Jack Riewoldt he did his ankle at the start of last quarter. He was in pretty irresistible form. And Melbourne, the best thing Melbourne did was every time Richmond got close, bang, they got the goal that mattered.
Okay, so Melbourne third, North fourth. We're going to zip through the next bit. You'll notice too, there it is. I was going to say we're experimenting with our new invisible credibility ladder this week, and I'm not a huge fan of it. But there we go. There's the first four. Now, I was going to have another debate about the bottom half of the eight, but I'm just going to make some executive decisions here, and hopefully you'll be okay with them. I've got Sydney fifth. West Coast, pretty good team, and yes, it was at home, but a good win.
That makes sense.
Next, I do it sometimes. Next, I've got Hawthorn, Adelaide. Best quality game of the week, no doubt about it, and great effort by the Hawks just to get up again in the last 5 minutes. But Adelaide lost nothing, so I've got Hawthorn, Adelaide, one above the other. Next two spots, you're right with that?
Yep. Well, I mean, that should be the case because they were basically sort of even money to win the game, and it could have gone either way. So it played out as an even pegged game, so they should be next to each other on the ladder.
Okay, got Collingwood in 8th spot. That was a pretty good win on Anzac Day. They need to find some form, and Julie did. Zip through the next bit of a ladder if you're good enough to show it again. West Coast, Geelong, Western Bulldogs, St Kilda, Brisbane and Gold Coast. And Dan, I'm going to leave the discussion about the bottom of the ladder to you. We've got Richmond, Essendon, Fremantle, Port Adelaide. Quick, give us an order and why.
Well, I would definitely say that Port Adelaide were the lowest credibility side of the week.
Okay, yes, give you that one, yep.
Fremantle probably next, given that regardless of all their issues, losing to Carlton's pretty poor.
Tick.
And then you've got Essendon and Richmond. I'd probably say it's a bit of a toss-up. I don't think there's much in it between either of them. I'm not sure what we went for in the end, but probably...
Whatever you say, Dan.
I would suggest that Essendon's loss was worse than Richmond's, given that they didn't... they were up against Collingwood, who were under the pump, hadn't been playing good footy, still with injuries, and Essendon were given a reasonable chance of winning that game and didn't fire a shot.
Okay. No, but you got it spot on. Couldn't agree more.
Can I ask one question?
Very quickly.
What's the green and the red bits?
Stop and go. You're stopping at the bottom and you're going at the top, and the white bits in the middle. Haven't quite worked that out yet. As you might see, we're sort of still getting our heads around how this works. Magnificent debut, Daniel. Now, I think John Pirrick's got a lot of cause to be concerned, and he might be putting a contract out on you.
I'll have to watch out for it, Rohan, but it's been a pleasure, and if I don't see you again, which is probably a chance now that John's going to go after me, well, it's been a pleasure knowing you. Likewise, Finey.
Oh, good.
Nice kid.
Yeah, he is. He'll do well. Now, I do need to pack a Winnie Blues, so my wallet's over there, and just come back at the end of the show. Time for our final break now, but make it a quickie because you won't want to miss the sight of two ageing cynics going right off their crusty old cruets. We'll see you in a moment.
Well, obviously the Range Rover recall, the oyster shortage and the lack of snow bumped the crowd up tonight?
Oh, I think so. I mean, it's fantastic, obviously. It was great to see a lot of Melbourne people here tonight. It was fantastic.
Welcome back. It's that time again. Pride will be punctured, sacred cows slaughtered, home truths delivered, and inappropriate analogies tortured when Mark, Finey and I have not just a bee, but an entire apiary in our bonnet. It's time for our angst against the clock in the Footyology Rant Off. Yeah, I know. Okay, I'm labouring the rant off thing, but I like it. I like a bit of theatre.
Stupid.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of which, you're up first today. It's your turn, so get yourself ready.
I'm ready.
Got the new ball in hand, pushing off the side screen.
Come on.
I'm going to count you in. We will get a clock for this soon, I promise you. 3, 2, 1, rant.
Death of the Footy Fan, Part 1. Or, I don't need these anymore, I'm going to the football. What have they done to me as a football supporter? I really only go now working for the press or taking my kids to the footy because the sort of footy fan that I grew up being, one with vitriol, festooned in colours, a serious combatant over the other side of the fence is no longer required of footy. I was a member of the animal enclosure. There actually was about 200 of us, not the thousands that claim it. And we worked on witty repartee, cutting remarks, delicious irony, to aggravate, upset, and in the end humiliate opposition supporters. Well, I went to the footy last year and I tried it again, and now there's a phone number to ring up if somebody is offended by the person who sits next to them. Everybody was like tapping at their phones, trying to be the first person in to get me kicked out of the footy. And what did I do wrong? I got stuck in the Jasper Pittard of Port Adelaide. He used to be called Macmillan Pittard, and I kept yelling out, "What did Macmillan ever do to you?" This attendant comes and tells me to stop doing it and not mention Macmillan ever again at the football. I said, what if I start talking about Rock Hudson and Jill St James, quite humorous, show where they were private investigators, Macmillan and wife. He said, that's it, you're out. I said, don't kick me out. I red carded myself, mate. I don't need this sort of football. It's been taken away from me. I'll never get it back. And quite frankly, I don't want it back. For me, the old footy fan Finey is dead. Next week, Mum, where's my duffel coat?
Oh, that's sad. It's impassioned. It's sad. It had pathos. I'm moved.
Macmillan Pittard.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you spiritually on this. Okay, your turn to count me in.
3, 7, 6.
You won't throw me that easily. I really liked Melbourne's performance against Richmond on Monday night, Finey. It was committed, full of running, not afraid to stand up for themselves, particularly at the end when Jack Watts hit the deck and copped a shot to the head by Alex Rance cheaper than one of those plastic showbag toys. Well, that's what I thought anyway, until the Channel 7 commentators put me right and made me realise it was actually all Watts' fault for getting in the way when Rance decided to throw the toys out of the cot and slam his forearm into the back of Watts' head. Rance was frustrated, you see. His team was losing, he got beaten in a marking contest, and he's a pretty good player who tried his heart out. Reported, it should have been Watts reported for striking Rance's forearm with his head. So convincing was the Channel 7 defence that within 2 minutes I've launched a free Alex Rance petition on change.org, sent off a picture of him in handcuffs to the t-shirt printers and rounded up a group of out-of-work actors for one of those pissy street theatre protests. I want hammer, duck and dust running our judicial system, Finey, because you know they're going to take your personal circumstances into account. Short of a quid, knock over your local 7-Eleven, torch a joint and go on a killing spree afterwards. You won't just get away with it, you'll get a sympathetic chuckle at one of those boys will be boys character references. You didn't really commit armed robbery, arson and homicide. It was just frustration.
That was frustratingly good.
Was it? Yeah, I'm telling you, the auto cue works, man.
No, I'm free-forming.
And as soon as we can afford a second prompter, Finey will be reading his as well.
You know they voted last week on our rants.
Yeah.
But we can't count them because we asked for horses or greyhounds with the name Fine or Rocco in them.
Okay.
There was a horse called Fine Ember, Fine Blade, Rocco's Lad, but all of them were pre-registered, so no votes. This week I've made it easy.
What is it?
Get your oldest relative and have a heart tattooed on their forearm with the name Rocco or Finey in the heart and then an arrow through it. So tear at the wrinkly, papery skin of Gran or Grandpa with Rocco or Finey, we'll count it, and then we'll know who the best ranter is.
It's all so easy. I just don't understand why we're not getting more votes. That's it for this week. Thanks for joining us again at Footyology. We're here to please mainly ourselves, but hopefully you as well. We're on every Tuesday at 12 p.m. on YouTube or 7:30 p.m. on Channel 31. And never forget, as the Beatles planned to write before they got a better idea, when I find myself in times of trouble, Rocco and Finey come to me.
That's it, I'm walking out.
Whispering words of wisdom, Footyology. See you next week.